Welcome, everybody, to the Nuggets of Gold podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about Mr. Fred Warner. And real quick, before we kind of get into it, this is going to be our recording, and then we're going to take a couple-week break after this. So we just wanted to get this out here real quick. I'm going on vacation, so probably we'll be back in July, I want to say, and we'll start talking about training camp and stuff there. But for this segment, we're talking about Fred Warner and why he needs to be paid before training camp. And Aiden, I'll let you start, man. What do you think about the caliber of player that Fred Warner is, and do you think that they need to get him locked up before training camp starts?
Yes to both of those questions. Fred Warner, everybody knows, all pro Fred, absolute beast. I think he was the only non-DB last year to grade top 10 in coverage. Obviously played some safety in college. Learned today that he's actually Mormon, which was a bit of a interesting revelation. But I mean, awesome player. Want to see this guy in a 49er uniform for the rest of his career. And he's a guy who came out and said after this last disappointing season that this is the last losing season that he's going to be a part of, which I think is really awesome coming from the guy who's going to lead your defense and be a leader on the team going forward. He's still 24, if I'm not wrong, but I mean, I feel like he's been our best linebacker since he got to the league. And I mean, absolute steal in the third round. And let's do right by this guy when we may have not done right by DeForest Buckner. Let's make sure that we get this guy locked up. And I think that that's definitely a priority before training camp.
I 100% agree. I think when you start looking at who the building blocks on the defense are, Fred is 100% one of the guys that comes to mind. Defo, I like that you bring him up because you kind of talk about a guy that is, really talk like you start talking about like success and stuff like that. And he was a guy that had been there for a long time, been in some rough years. I also didn't know that Fred Warner said that, so that's actually very encouraging. But I think you 100% have to lock him up. Fred and Nick Bosa are the two guys that are the ones you really have to extend, and I think this has to get done before training camp. You kind of look at where the 49ers are at on the defensive side of the ball. New defensive coordinator, who is it? D'Amico Ryans, who has coached Fred his whole career in the NFL. So this is the guy you have to have, locked in, ready to go come July. And I think that's why you have to get it done. Worst case scenario is that Fred would hold out, and I don't think there's been anything like talked about that yet. But he's a guy that was a dominant player on the defensive side of the ball last year, if not the best linebacker in the league, one of the top linebackers in the league. And there's definitely some sweet backers, so there could be a few, but I think you just have to re-sign him. And he's going to be the guy that he's the leader of the defense. He's the vocal leader. He's called the defense pretty much every game. He has called it every game of his career. And we talked about this before. I think he's one of the few players in the NFL that legitimately gets better every single week, because the best version of Fred that I can remember is him at the end of last season. And then it's just consistently getting better and getting better every single week. And this is the guy that started his first game in the NFL and called the defense. So incredibly intelligent player. He's a great locker room presence. He checks every single box. So 100%, I'm all in. Gotta pay Fred.
Yeah, I think that you hit it right on the head. And another reason to get it done before training camp, we're going to get more into specifics what we think this deal could potentially look like. Is right now Bobby Wagner is the market leader in terms of average annual value at 18 million. There's a couple of these other guys. I don't know when like Devin White comes up. But you want to get these kind of contracts. You want to get these guys extended as soon as you can so that you're able to set the market and get the player happy because he's the best at his position. And then the next year, someone comes and outbids you. Similar to what we saw with Jimmy Garoppolo when we signed him to that record-breaking deal. Everybody kind of freaked out, but now he's like the 15th highest paid quarterback, and he's still on that same deal. So I think that it's important to get it done as soon as you possibly can because I mean stuff like that always looks better the longer it progresses almost. So I think that's another reason to talk about why it needs to be done soon. Both for Fred to go into this season with some financial security and for the Niners in the long term.